things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson with Reality Shifters and the International Mandela Effect Conference, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den.
Are ghosts real? We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness, this is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to another episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday, December 9th, 2020, and tonight we're going to do something just a little bit different. Being that it is the Christmas season, we're going to drop the paranormal conspiracy for tonight. We're going to do story time, that's right. We're going to read some classic Christmas stories and perhaps one or two that you may never have heard before. So grab a cold drink, a warm blanket, and curl up by the fire and prepare for story time. Tonight, December 2nd, 2020, on the Dark Wolf's Den Show. But first, today in history. You guys know that I absolutely love when the fact of the day lines up with the topic of the day, and today is no different. You see, on this day in 1965, A Charlie Brown Christmas, the very first ever Peanuts animated special, premieres in the US on ABC. It was viewed by 45% of those watching television that evening, with the number of homes watching the special at an estimated 15,490,000 people, placing it at number 2 in the ratings, only behind Bonanza on NBC. And that is today's Today in History. That's right, you believe that, guys? That is absolutely incredible. I know you guys are probably thinking, oh, he planned the episode around the fact of the day. No, that is not what happened. Actually, I planned the episode, and then I went to find the fact of the day and could not have been more amazed when I found that. So, yeah, that just totally blew my mind. With that said, let's get on with the show. Now, for those of you who may or may not know, when radio was first invented, it was really the only form of entertainment most people had. And most people would gather around the radios every evening and listen to the radio play and the radio dramas, if you will, that would play out across the airwaves. There was no television. Everybody would just use their imagination and listen to the stories and try to imagine what would be going on, you know, what it would look like. Well, that is one thing I want to recapture. As you guys know, I'm trying to do an old-fashioned Christmas here in the den, and this is no different. I want to capture the magic of the old-fashioned radio Christmas stories, and that's what we're going to present tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Christmas stories the old-fashioned way, on the radio, using just your imagination and nothing more. With that said, our first story tonight is about the wisdom of gift giving. Gift giving is something that we all struggle with every season, right? We've got a special someone in our life and we really want to do something special for them, but we really can't afford it. So what would you do? Well, this story coming up is about just that. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry, performed by Jerry the Dark Wolf Hicks, with special guest star My Life DIY. $1.87. That was all. She had put it aside 1 cent and then another in her careful buying of meat and other food. Della counted it 3 times. $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was nothing to do but fall on the bed and cry. So Della did it. While the lady of the room was slowly growing quieter, we can look at the room. Furnished rooms at a cost of $8 a week. There's little more to say about it. In the hall below was a letter box too small to hold a letter. There was an electric bell, but it could not make a sound. Also, there was a name beside the door, Mr. James Dillingham Young. When the name was placed there, Mr. James Dillingham Young was being paid $30 a week. Now, when he was being paid only $20 a week, the name seemed too long and important. It should perhaps have been Mr. James D. Young, but when Mr. James Dillingham Young entered the furnished rooms, his name became very short indeed. Mrs. James Dillingham Young put her arms warmly about him and called him Jim. You have already met her. She is Della. Della finished her crying and cleaned the marks of it from her face. She stood by the window and looked out with no interest. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a gift. She had put aside as much as she could for months with this result. $20 a week is not much. Everything had cost more than she had expected. It always happened like that. Only $1.87 to buy a gift for Jim, her Jim. She had had many happy hours planning something nice for him, something nearly good enough, something almost worth the honor of belonging to Jim. There was a looking glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you've seen the kind of looking glass that is placed in $8 furnished rooms. It was very narrow. A person could only see a little of himself at a time. However, if he was very thin and moved very quickly, he might be able to get a good view of himself. Della, being quite thin, had mastered this art. Suddenly, she turned from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brightly, but her face had lost its color. Quickly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its complete length. The James Dillingham Youngs were very proud of two things which they owned. One thing was Jim's gold pocket watch. It had once belonged to his father, and, long ago, it had belonged to his father's father. The other thing was Della's hair. If a queen had lived in the rooms near theirs, Della would have washed and dried her hair where the queen could see it. Della knew her hair was more beautiful than any queen's jewels and gifts. If a king had lived in the same house with all his riches, Jim would have looked at his watch every time they met. Jim knew that no king had anything so valuable. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, shining like a falling stream of brown water. It reached below her knee. It almost made itself into a dress for her. And then she put it up on her head again, nervously and quickly. Once she stopped for a moment and stood still while a tear or two ran down her face. She put on her old brown coat. She put on her old brown hat. With the bright light still in her eyes, she moved quickly out the door and down the street. When she stopped, the sign said, Mrs. Sofroni, hair articles of all kind. Up to the second floor Della ran and stopped to get her breath. Mrs. Sofroni, large, too white, cold-eyed, looked at her.
Will you buy my hair?
Asked Della. I buy hair, said Mrs. Sofroni. Take your head off and let me look at it. Down fell the brown waterfall. $20, said Miss Sofroni, lifting the hair to feel its weight.
Give it to me quick,
said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours seemed to fly by. She was going from one shop to another to find a gift for Jim. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any other of the shops, and she had looked in every shop in the city. It was a gold watch chain, very simply made. Its value was in its rich and pure material. Because it was so plain and simple, you knew that it was very valuable. All good things are like this. It was good enough for the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that Jim must have it. It was like him, quietness and value. Jim and the chain both had quietness and value. She paid $21 for it, and she hurried home with the chain and 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim could look at his watch and learn the time anywhere he might be, though the watch was so fine it had never had a fine chain. He sometimes took it out and looked at it only when no one could see him do it. When Della arrived home, her mind quieted a little. She began to think more reasonably. She started to try to cover the sad marks of what she had done. Love and large-hearted giving, when added together, can leave deep marks. It is never easy to cover these marks, dear friends. Never easy. Within 40 minutes, her head looked a little better. With her short hair, she looked wonderfully like a schoolboy. She stood at the looking-glass for a long time.
If Jim doesn't kill me,
she said to herself,
before he looks at me a second time, he'll say I look like a girl who sings and dances for money. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87?
At 7, Jim's dinner was ready for him. Jim was never late. Della held the watch chain in her hand and sat near the door where he always entered. Then she heard his steps in the hall, and her face lost color for a moment. She often said little prayers quietly about simple, everyday things, and now she said,
Please, God, make him still think I'm pretty.
The door opened, and Jim stepped in. He looked very thin and was not smiling. Poor fellow, he was only 22, and with a family to take care of. He needed a new coat, and he had nothing to cover his cold hands. Jim stopped inside the door. He was as quiet as a hunting dog when it is near a bird. His eyes looked strangely at Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not understand. It filled her with fear. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor anything she had been ready for. He simply looked at her with that strange expression on his face. Della went to him.
Jim, dear, don't look at me like that,
she cried.
I had my hair cut off, and I sold it. I couldn't live through Christmas without giving you a gift. My hair will grow again. You won't care, will you? My hair grows very fast. It's Christmas, Jim. Let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I got for you.
Cut off your hair? Asked Jim slowly. He seemed to labor to understand what had happened. He seemed not to feel sure he knew.
Cut it off and sold it,
said Della.
Don't you like me now? I'm me, Jim. I'm the same without my hair.
Jim looked around the room. You say your hair is gone? He said.
You don't have to look for it. It's sold, I tell you,
said Della.
Sold and gone, too. It's the night before Christmas, boy. Be good to me, because I sold it for you. Maybe the hairs on my head should be counted,
she said.
But no one could ever count my love for you. Shall we eat dinner, Jim?
Jim put his arms around his Della. For 10 seconds, let us look in another direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year, how different are they? Someone may give you an answer, but it will be wrong. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. My meaning will be explained soon. From inside the coat, Jim took something tied in paper. He threw it upon the table. I want you to understand me, Dell, he said. Nothing like a haircut could make me love you any less. But if you'll open that, you may know what I felt when I came in. White fingers pulled off the paper, and then a cry of joy, then a change to tears. For there lay the combs that Della had seen in a shop window and loved for a long time. Beautiful combs with jewels, perfect for her beautiful hair. She had known they cost too much for her to buy them. She had looked at them without the least hope of owning them, and now they were hers, but her hair was gone. But she held them to her heart, and at last was able to look up and say,
My hair grows fast, Jim.
And then she jumped up and cried,
Oh!
Jim had not yet seen his beautiful gift. She held it out to him in her open hand. The gold seemed to shine softly as if with her own warm and loving spirit. Isn't it perfect, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at your watch 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how they look together. Jim sat down and smiled. Della, said he, let's put our Christmas gifts away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use now. I sold the watch to get the money to buy the combs, and now I think we should have our dinner. The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the newborn Christ child. They were the first to give Christmas gifts. Being wise, their gifts were doubtless wise ones. And here I have told you the story of two children who were not wise. Each sold the most valuable thing he owned in order to buy a gift for the other. But let me speak a last word to the wise of these days. Of all who give gifts, these two were the most wise. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are the most wise. Everywhere they are the wise ones. They are the Magi. The end. And that has always been one of my favorite Christmas stories since I heard it years ago, because it's so touching. They get rid of the one thing that means the most to them to do something that would mean the most to the other person. The wonder of gift giving is really, really awesome, you know. And there's another story about gift giving. A matter of fact, about somebody who don't like gift giving, as a matter of fact. Somebody who don't like Christmas at all. Someone you might call a Grinch. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch that lived just north of Whoville did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was two sizes too small. Whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Who's, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming, I must find a way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake up bright and early, they'd rush for their toys. And then, oh the noise, noise! That's the one thing he hated, the noise. Then the Who's, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast. Feast, they would feast on Who pudding and rare Who beast, which was something that the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Who's would start singing. They'd sing and they'd sing and they'd sing, sing. The more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea, an awful idea. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and coat. And he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I'll look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer, the Grinch looked around. But since reindeers are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, then he took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, get up, and the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Who's were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square, "This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two, then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorns, and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch, very nimbly, stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. "And now," grinned the Grinch, "I will stuff up the tree." And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove, when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree, why?" But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick, he thought up a lie and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little tot," the fake Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child, then he patted her head, and he got her a drink and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log for the fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire, and the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 1/4 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze when he packed up his sled. Packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. "Pooh-pooh" to the Who's, he was grinchiously humming. "They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up, I know what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry boo-hoo. That's a noise," grinned the Grinch, "that I simply must hear." So he paused and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville, the Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons, it came without tags, it came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours, till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the moment his heart didn't feel quite so right, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast, and he himself, the Grinch, carved the Christmas beast. The Grinch, ladies and gentlemen. And, stories like that remind us that the magic of this season, the magic of this holiday can really do some amazing things. It can make people wake up to realities they'd never seen before and can really open one's eyes to the empathy that lies within. There's a lot more to these Christmas stories than just stories. They're such great moral stories, right? Something always to be learned. Something that will go with us the rest of our lives. Ladies and gentlemen, it's getting to the bottom of the first half of the hour, and we need to go ahead and take a network break right here. We're going to be back with more stories on the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show right after these messages, so don't you touch that dial.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, it's AJ the Ripon Rabbit. How was your week? And now, the weekend has officially begun thanks to Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den. He's kicking off the weekend right on a Wednesday night with Christmas stories. He'll be back again tomorrow night, Thursday, December 10th, with a look at Christmas ghost stories. Should be a very interesting follow-up to tonight's show. Then I'll return Friday, December 11th, with Mysterious Booms. Explore through the rabbit hole along with me the recent surge in worldwide mysterious noises and unidentified sounds in the air. Did you just hear that boom? Join me Friday night starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. We'll investigate it together. Then Saturday, December 12th, special guest Laurel Erica will be here. She's a master of the English language, and you will not want to miss Word Magic with Laurel Erica on Saturday night, December 12th. Starting again at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then we'll end out the weekend right together Sunday, December 13th, with a look at ley lines. Now, ley lines refer to straight alignments drawn between various historic structures and prominent landmarks. But do they carry along with them rivers of supernatural energy? Join me Sunday night, December 13th, and find out as we end out the weekend right together. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to jump on over to theriponrabbithole.com and hop on our mail list. We'll send you out our weekend schedule every Wednesday morning. It includes an outlook straight to your inbox of exactly the rabbit holes we'll explore for the weekend ahead. While you're there, would you do me a favor? At the bottom of every page at riponrabbithole.com is a little red button where you can record up to 30 seconds. Would you send me your Christmas wishes, please? I'd love to hear them. I'll be including all of the ones that I receive in an upcoming broadcast before Christmas Eve. So please make sure to send me your Christmas wishes. If wishes could be fishes, Christmas would smell kind of funny. I'm enjoying tonight's old-time look at radio thanks to Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den Show. If you are too, make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell with notifications. You'll get notified every time we go live. You're listening to Ripon Common Sense Radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Before we continue tonight, guys, just a quick programming note. I know a lot of you realized that we had to remove the song at the halftime, and my apologies there, but because of the time restraints that we have now, I won't be able to put the music in the halftime anymore. We might put a special one in there, if we have something special come up, but generally speaking, we won't have a halftime song anymore as we're trying to keep the show to an hour. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us tonight, we are taking a break from the paranormal and the conspiracy, and we are reading Christmas stories. That's right, we're bringing back the old radio play style dramas, and we're reading them Christmas style. That's right. In the first half, we heard the gift of the Magi about the wisdom of gift giving, and then we heard the story of the Grinch about the hatred of gift giving and growing a heart because of the love of Christmas, and realize that Christmas isn't about the things we buy, but about being together. In the second half, we're going to go over Christmas wishes. There are so many good stories of Christmas wishes, and the first one is a very, very touching story. This was a story that was written in Russian originally. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you now Papa Panov's Special Christmas. Papa Panov's Special Christmas. Translated into English by Leo Tolstoy, as read by Jerry the Dark Wolf Hicks. This story is based on Matthew 25:35. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. It was Christmas Eve, and although it was still afternoon, lights had begun to appear in the shops and houses of the little Russian village, for the short winter day was nearly over. Excited children scurried indoors, and now only muffled sounds of chatter and laughter escaped from closed shutters. Old Papa Panov, the village shoemaker, stepped outside his shop to take one last look around. The sounds of happiness, the bright lights, and the faint but delicious smells of Christmas cooking reminded him of his past Christmas times, when his wife had still been alive and his own children little. Now they had gone. His usually cheerful face, with the little laughter wrinkles behind the round steel spectacles, looked sad now, but he went back indoors with a firm step, put up the shutters, and set a pot of coffee to heat on the charcoal stove. Then, with a sigh, he settled in his big armchair. Papa Panov did not often read, but tonight he pulled down the big old family Bible and, slowly tracing the lines with one forefinger, he read again the Christmas story. He read how Mary and Joseph, tired by their journey to Bethlehem, found no room for them at the end, so that Mary's little baby was born in the cowshed. "Oh dear," exclaimed Papa Panov. "If only they had come here. I would have given them my bed, and I would have covered the baby with my patchwork quilt to keep him warm." He read on about the wise men who had come to see the baby Jesus, bringing him splendid gifts. Papa Panov's face fell. "I have no gift that I could give him," he thought sadly. Then his face brightened. He put down the Bible, got up, and stretched his long arms to the shelf high up in his little room. He took down a small dusty box and opened it. Inside was a perfect pair of tiny leather shoes. Papa Panov smiled with satisfaction. Yes, they were as good as he had remembered, the best shoes he had ever made. I should give him those, he decided, as he gently put them away and sat down again. He was feeling tired now, and the further he read, the sleepier he became. The print began to dance before his eyes so that he closed them, just for a minute. In no time at all, Papa Panov was fast asleep. And as he slept, he dreamed. He dreamed that someone was in his room, and he knew at once, as one does in dreams, who that person was. It was Jesus. "You have been wishing that you could see me, Papa Panov," he said kindly. "Then look for me tomorrow. It will be Christmas Day, and I will visit you. But look carefully, for I shall not tell you who I am." When at last Papa Panov awoke, the bells were ringing out, and a thin light was filtering through the shutters. "Bless my soul," said Papa Panov, "it's Christmas Day." He stood up and stretched himself, for he was rather stiff. Then his face filled with happiness as he remembered his dream. This would be a very special Christmas after all, for Jesus was coming to visit him. How would he look? Would he be a little baby, as at the first Christmas? Would he be a grown man, a carpenter, or the great king that he is, God's son? He must watch carefully for the whole day through, so that he recognized him whenever he came. Papa Panav put on a special pot of coffee for his Christmas breakfast, took down the shutters, and looked out the window. The street was deserted. No one was stirring yet. No one except the road sweeper. He looked as miserable and dirty as ever, and well he might. Whoever wanted to work on Christmas Day, and in the raw, cold, and bitter freezing mist of such a morning? Papa Panav opened the shop door, letting in a thin stream of cold air. "Come in," he shouted across the street cheerily. "Come in and have some hot coffee to keep out the cold." The sweeper looked up, scarcely able to believe his ears. He was only too glad to put down his broom and come into the warm room. His old clothes steamed gently in the heat of the stove, and he clasped both red hands round the comforting warm mug as he drank. Papa Panav watched him with satisfaction, but every now and then his eyes strayed to the window. It would never do to miss his special visitor. "Expecting someone?" the sweeper asked at last, so Papa Panav told him about his dream. "Well, I hope he comes," the sweeper said. "You've given me a bit of Christmas cheer I never expected to have. I'd say you deserve to have your dream come true." And he actually smiled. When he had gone, Papa Panav put on a cabbage soup for his dinner, then went to the door again, scanning the street. He saw no one, but he was mistaken. Someone was coming. The girl walked so slowly and quietly, hugging the walls of shops and houses, that it was a while before he noticed her. She looked very tired, and she was carrying something. As she drew nearer, he could see that it was a baby, wrapped in a thin shawl. There was such sadness in her face, and in the pinched little face of the baby, that Papa Panav's heart went out to them. "Won't you come in?" he called, stepping outside to meet them. "You both need a warm seat by the fire and a rest." The young mother let him shepherd her indoors into the comfort of the armchair. She gave him a big sigh of relief. "I'll warm some milk for the baby," Papa Panav said. "I've had children of my own. I can feed her for you." He took the milk from the stove and carefully fed the baby from a spoon, warming her tiny feet by the stove at the same time. "She needs shoes," the cobbler said. But the girl replied, "I cannot afford shoes. I've got no husband to bring home money. I'm on my way to the next village to get work." A sudden thought flashed through Papa Panav's mind. He remembered the little shoes he had looked at last night, but he had been keeping those for Jesus. He looked again at the cold little feet and made up his mind. "Try these on her," he said, handing the baby and the shoes to the mother. The beautiful little shoes were a perfect fit. The girl smiled happily, and the baby gurgled with pleasure. "You have been so kind to us," the girl said when she got up with her baby to go. "May all your Christmas wishes come true." But Papa Panav was beginning to wonder if his very special Christmas wish would come true. Perhaps he had missed his visitor. He looked anxiously up and down the street. There were plenty of people about, but they were all faces that he recognized. There were neighbors going to call on their families. They nodded and smiled and wished him Happy Christmas. Or beggars, and Papa Panav hurried indoors to fetch them hot soup and a generous hunk of bread, hurrying out again in case he missed the important stranger. All too soon the winter dusk fell. When Papa Panav next went to the door and strained his eyes, he could no longer make out the passers-by. Most were home and indoors by now anyway. He walked slowly back into his room at last, put up the shutters, and sat down wearily in his armchair. So it had been just a dream after all. Jesus had not come. Then all at once he knew that he was no longer alone in the room. This was not a dream, for he was wide awake. At first he seemed to see before his eyes the long stream of people who come to him that day. He saw again the old road sweeper, the young mother and her baby, and the beggars he had fed. As they passed, each whispered, "Didn't you see me, Papa Panav?" "Who are you?" he called out, bewildered. Then another voice answered him. It was the voice from his dream, the voice of Jesus. "I was hungry, and you fed me," he said. "I was naked, and you clothed me. I was cold, and you warmed me. I came to you today, and every one of those you helped and welcomed. Then all was quiet and still, only the sound of a big clock ticking. A great peace and happiness seemed to fill the room, overflowing Papa Panav's heart, until he wanted to burst out singing and laughing and dancing with joy. So he did come after all, was all that he said. The end. What an incredible story, and an even better message, right? It reminds me of Hebrews 13. Let brotherly love continue. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. And that's pretty well what this story was, right? All the people that he took in, all the people that he helped were Jesus in one way or another, as God resides in all of us. But I think it's a little deeper than that, right? He met Jesus multiple times through the care and through the love that he showed in others. And from wishes coming true to having a wish that probably shouldn't come true. We've all heard keep Christmas in your heart year round, and wouldn't it be great to be Christmas every day? Well, let's think about that. Would it really be great to be Christmas every day? Christmas Every Day by William Dean Howells, as read by Jerry the Dark Wolf Hicks. The little girl came into her papa's study, as she always did Saturday morning before breakfast, and asked for a story. He tried to beg off that morning, for he was very busy, but she would not let him, so he began. Well, once there was a little pig. She put her hand over his mouth and stopped him at the word. She said she had heard little pig stories till she was perfectly sick of them. Well, what kind of story shall I tell then? About Christmas. It's getting the season. It's past Thanksgiving already. It seems to me, her papa argued, that I've told as often about Christmas as I have about little pigs. No difference. Christmas is more interesting, said the little girl. Well, her papa roused himself from his writing by a great effort. Well then, I'll tell you about the little girl that wanted it Christmas every day in the year. How would you like that? First rate, said the little girl, and she nestled into the comfortable shape in his lap, ready for listening. Very well then, this little pig... Oh, why are you pounding me for? Because you said little pig instead of little girl. I should like to know what's the difference between a little pig and a little girl that wanted it Christmas every day. Papa, said the little girl warmingly, if you don't go on, I'll give it to you. And at that her papa darted off like lightning and began to tell the story as fast as he could. Well, once there was a little girl who liked Christmas so much that she wanted it to be Christmas every day of the year. And as soon as Thanksgiving was over, she began to send postal cards to the old Christmas fairy to ask if she mightn't have it. But the old fairy never answered any of the postals, and after a while the little girl found out that the fairy was pretty particular, and wouldn't notice anything but letters, not even correspondence cards and envelopes, but real letters on sheets of paper, and sealed outside with a monogram, or your initial anyway. So then, she began to send her letters, and in about 3 weeks, or just the day before Christmas, she got a letter from the fairy, saying she might have it Christmas every day for a year, and then they would see about having it longer. The little girl was a good deal excited already, preparing for the old-fashioned once-a-year Christmas that was coming the next day. And perhaps the fairy's promise did make such an impression on her as it would have at some other time. She just resolved to keep it to herself and surprise everybody with it as it kept coming true. Then it slipped out of her mind altogether. She had a splendid Christmas. She went to bed early so as to let Santa Claus have a chance at the stockings, and in the morning she was up first of anybody and went and felt them and found hers all lumpy with packages of candy and oranges and grapes and pocketbooks and rubber balls and all kinds of small presents. And her big brother's was nothing but the tongs in them, and her young lady sister's was a new silk umbrella, and her papa's and mama's with potatoes and pieces of coal wrapped up in tissue paper, just as they always had every Christmas. Then she waited around till the rest of the family were up, and she was first to burst into the library when the doors were open and look at the large presents laid out on the library table. Books and portfolios, boxes of stationeries and breastpins, dolls and little stoves, and dozens of handkerchiefs and inkstands and skates and snow shovels, and photograph frames and little easels and boxes of watercolors, and Turkish paste and nougat and candied cherries, and dolls' houses and waterproofs, and the big Christmas tree lighted and standing in a wastebasket in the middle. She had a splendid Christmas day. She ate so much candy that she did not want any breakfast, and the whole forenoon the presents kept pouring in that the expressman had not had time to deliver the night before. And she went round giving the presents she had got for other people, and came home and ate turkey and cranberry for dinner, and plum pudding and nuts and raisins and oranges and more candy, and then went out and coasted and came in with a stomachache crying. And her papa said he would see if his house was turned into that sort of fool's paradise another year, and they had a light supper, and pretty early everybody went to bed cross. Here the little girl pounded her papa in the back again. Well, what now? Did I say pigs? You made them act like pigs. Well, didn't they? No matter, you oughtn't to put it in the story. Very well, then, I'll take it all out, her papa went on. The little girl slept very heavily, and she slept very late, but she was wakened at last by the other children dancing round her bed, with their stockings full of presents in their hands. What is it? Said the little girl, as she rubbed her eyes and tried to rise up in bed. Christmas! 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 They all shouted and waved their stockings. Nonsense! It was Christmas yesterday. Her brothers and sisters just laughed. We don't know about that. It's Christmas today, anyway. You come into the library and see. Then all at once it flashed on the little girl that the fairy was keeping his promise, and her year of Christmases was beginning. She was dreadfully sleepy, but she sprang up like a lark that had overeaten itself and gone to bed cross, and darted into the library. There it was again. Books and portfolios and boxes of stationeries and breastpins. You needn't go over it all, Papa. I guess I can remember just what was there, says the little girl. Well, and there was Christmas tree blazing away, and the family picking out their presents but looking pretty sleepy, and her father perfectly puzzled, and her mother ready to cry. I'm sure I don't see how I'm to dispose of all these things, said her mother, and her father said it seemed to him that they had had something just like it the day before, but he supposed he must have dreamed it. This struck the little girl as the best kind of joke, and so she ate so much candy she didn't want any breakfast, and went round carrying presents, and had turkey and cranberry for dinner, then went out and coasted, and came in with a, Papa! Well, what now? What did you promise, you forgetful thing? Oh, yes. Well, the next day, it was just the same thing over again, but everybody getting crosser. And at the end of the week's time, so many people had lost their tempers that you could pick up lost tempers anywhere. They perfectly strewed the ground. Even when people tried to recover their tempers, they usually got somebody else's, and it made the most dreadful mix. The little girl began to get frightened. Keeping the secret all to herself, she wanted to tell her mother, but she didn't dare to. And she was ashamed to ask the fairy to take back her gift. It seemed ungrateful and ill-bred, and she thought she would try to stand it. But she hardly knew she could, for a whole year. So it went on and on. It was Christmas on St. Valentine's Day and Washington's birthday, just the same as any day, and it didn't even skip the 1st of April, though everything was counterfeit that day, and that was some little relief. After a while, coal and potatoes began to be awfully scarce. So many had been wrapped up in tissue paper to fool papas and mamas with. Turkeys got to be about $1,000 apiece. Papa! Well, what? You're beginning to fib. Well, 2,000 then. And they got to passing off almost anything for turkeys. Half-grown hummingbirds, even rocks out of the Arabian Nights. The real turkeys were so scarce. And cranberries, well, they asked $1 apiece for cranberries. All the woods and orchards were cut down for Christmas trees, and where the woods and orchards used to be, it looked like a stubble field with the stumps. After a while, they had to make Christmas trees out of rags and stuff like bran, like old-fashioned dolls. But there were plenty of rags because people got so poor buying presents for one another that they couldn't get any new clothes, and they just wore their old ones to tatters. They got so poor that everybody had to go to the poorhouse, except the confectioners and the fancy storekeepers and the picture book sellers and the expressmen. And they all got so rich and proud that they would hardly wait upon a person when he came to buy. It was perfectly shameful. Well, after it had gone on about 3 or 4 months, the little girl, whenever she came into the room in the morning and saw those great, ugly, lumpy stockings dangling at the fireplace, and the disgusting presents around everywhere, used to just sit down and burst out crying. In 6 months, she was perfectly exhausted. She couldn't even cry anymore. She just lay on the lounge and rolled her eyes and panted. About the beginning of October, she took to sitting down on dolls wherever she found them, French dolls or any kind. She hated the sight of them so. And by Thanksgiving, she was crazy and just slammed her presents across the room. By that time, people didn't carry presents around nicely anymore. They flung them over the fence or through the window or anything, and instead of running their tongues out and taking great pains to write, "For dear Papa," or Mama, or Brother, or Sister, or Susie, or Sammy, or Billy, or Bobby, or Jimmy, or Jenny, or whoever it was, and troubling to get the spelling right and then signing their name and Xmas, they used to write it in the gift books. "Take it, you horrid old thing," and then go and bang it against the front door. Nearly everybody had built barns to hold their presents, but pretty soon the barns overflowed, and then they used them to lie out in the rain or anywhere. Sometimes the police used to come and tell them to shovel their presents off the sidewalks, or they would arrest them. "I thought you said everybody had gone to the poorhouse," interrupted the little girl. "They did at first," said Papa, "but after a while the poorhouses got so full that they had to send people back to their own houses. They tried to cry when they got back, but they couldn't make the least sound." "Why couldn't they?" "Because they had lost their voices saying Merry Christmas so much. Did I tell you how it was on the 4th of July?" "No, how was it?" And the little girl nestled closer in expectation of something uncommon. "Well, the night before, the boys stayed up to celebrate, as they always do, and fell asleep before 12 o'clock, as usual, expecting to be wakened by the bells and cannons. But it was nearly 8 o'clock before the first boy in the United States woke up. Then he found out what the trouble was. As soon as he could get his clothes on, and he ran out of the house and smashed a big cannon torpedo down on the pavement, but it didn't make any more noise than a damp wad of paper. And after he tried about 20 or 30 more, he began to pick them up and look at them. Every single torpedo was a big raisin. Then he just streaked it upstairs and examined his firecrackers and toy pistol and $2 collection of fireworks and found that they were nothing but sugar and candy painted up to look like fireworks. By 10 o'clock, every boy in the United States found out that his 4th of July things had turned into Christmas things, and then they just sat down and cried. They were so mad. There are about 20 million boys in the United States, so you can imagine what a noise they made. Some men got together before night with a little powder that hadn't turned into purple sugar yet, and they said they would fire off one cannon anyway, but the cannon burst into 1,000 pieces, for it was nothing but rock candy, and some of the men nearly got killed. The 4th of July orations all turned into Christmas carols, and when anybody tried to read the Declaration, instead of saying, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary," he was sure to sing, "God rest you merry gentlemen." It was perfectly awful. The little girl drew a deep sigh of satisfaction. "And how was it at Thanksgiving?" Her papa hesitated. "Well, I'm almost afraid to tell you. I'm afraid you'll think it's wicked." "Well, tell anyway," said the little girl. Well, before it came Thanksgiving, it had leaked out who had caused all these Christmases. The little girl had suffered so much that she had talked about it in her sleep, and after that hardly anybody would play with her. People just perfectly despised her, because if it had not been for her greediness, it wouldn't have happened. And now, when it came to Thanksgiving, and she wanted them to go to church and have squash pie and turkey and show their gratitude, they said that all the turkeys had been eaten up for her old Christmas dinners, and if she would stop the Christmases, they would see about the gratitude. Wasn't it dreadful? And the very next day, the little girl began to send letters to the Christmas fairy and then telegrams to stop it. But it didn't do any good, and then she got to calling at the fairy's house. But the girl that came to the door always said not at home, or engaged, or at dinner, or something like that. And so it went on till it came to the old once-a-year Christmas Eve. The little girl fell asleep, and when she awoke in the morning, she found it was all nothing but a dream, suggested the little girl. No, indeed, said her papa. It was all every bit true. Well, what did she find out then? Well, that it wasn't Christmas at last, and was it ever going to be any more? Now it's time for breakfast. The little girl held her papa fast around the neck. You shan't go if you're going to leave it so. How do you want it left? Christmas once a year. All right, said her papa, and he went on again. Well, there was this greatest rejoicing all over the country, and it extended clear up into Canada. The people met together everywhere and kissed and cried for joy. The city carts went around and gathered up all the candy and raisins and nuts and dumped them into the river, and it made the fish perfectly sick. And the whole United States, as far out as Alaska, was one blaze of bonfires, where the children were burning up their gift books and presents of all kind. The little girl went to thank the old fairy because he had stopped its being Christmas, and she said she hoped he would keep his promise and see that Christmas never, never came again. Then the fairy frowned and asked her if she was sure she knew what she meant, and the little girl asked her why not. And the old fairy said that now she was behaving just as greedily as ever, and she'd better look out. This made the little girl think it all over again carefully, and she said she would be willing to have a Christmas about once in 1,000 years. Then she said 100, and then she said 10, and at last she got down to 1. Then the fairy said that was the good old way that had pleased people ever since Christmas began, and she was agreed. Then the little girl said, "What are your shoes made of?" And the fairy said, "Leather." And the little girl said, "Bargain's done forever," and skipped off and hippity-hopped the whole way home. She was so glad. "How will that do?" asked the papa. "First rate," said the little girl, but she hated to have the story stop and was rather sober. However, her mamma put her head in at the door and asked her papa, "Are you never coming to breakfast? What have you been telling that child?" "Oh, just a moral tale." The little girl caught him around the neck again. "We know. Don't you tell what, Papa? Don't you tell what?" The end. So would you like it to be Christmas every day of the year? Perhaps keeping Christmas in our heart would be the more common sense thing to do, right? But what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Have you enjoyed Christmas story time this evening in an old-fashioned radio drama style? I sure do hope so, because I've really enjoyed doing this for you guys. This is something completely different, something we don't ever really do around here. So if you're interested in hearing more episodes like this, definitely please leave a comment below and let us know, because we would like to hear what you guys think. We're going to keep with the paranormal and conspiracy, make no mistake about it. But if you want to hear nights where we just sit down and do story time and just little effects and things like that with the stories like we did tonight, I would absolutely be very much open to doing that. Also, while you're down there leaving a comment, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and that subscribe button. That's right, if you haven't already. And please share this out with your friends, family, your family's friends. Let people know we're here, because we are a grassroots station, and we do our best to do this for you guys every week. And all we ask is you just let people know that we're here. Ladies and gentlemen, that is just common sense. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, December 9th, 2020. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. This episode may be coming to an end, but fear not, we will be back tomorrow night, December 10th, 2020, at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for a brand new episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. That's right. We're going to carry on these Christmas stories with it Victorian English tradition holiday tradition, I should say, that is kind of got lost over the ages, and that is telling Christmas ghost stories. So come back tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, for Christmas ghost stories, or Christmas stories part 2, if you will. Then on Friday, our buddy AJ the Ripon Rabbit takes to the airwaves with a Ripon Rabbit Hole live show. That's right. I happen to have been eavesdropping on those rabbits over there, and I happen to know what they're going to be talking about this weekend. That's right. On Friday, he's going to be talking about mystery booms. Explore the recent surge in worldwide mysterious noises and unidentified sounds in the air. Did you just hear that boom? Apparently people have been hearing it all over the world, and AJ will discuss that on Friday night. Then on Saturday, December 12th, 2020, our buddy AJ the Ripon Rabbit is joined by special guest Laurel Erica. Laurel is an English linguist who has got many, many years of expertise in the English language, and what she has uncovered is the possibility of magic hidden within the English language. There's so much to unwrap here, guys. Make sure you tune in Saturday night for Word Magic. Then on Sunday, December 13th, 2020, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, he'll take to the airwaves one more time to round out our weekend here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. That's right, AJ on Sunday will be talking about ley lines. Ley lines refer to straight alignments drawn between various historical structures and prominent landmarks. Do they carry along with them rivers of supernatural energy, or perhaps even earth energy? The way I understand it, Tesla was very interested in things like that. So if you're interested in things like that, guys, make sure you come back on Sunday, December 13th, 2020, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show where he talks about ley lines. All shows here on the network start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. So make sure you guys set your schedules and reminders. Also, make sure you hop on over to the riponrabbithole.com. That is RIPON RABBITHOLE.com. That's right. Over there, you're going to find our mail list. Go ahead and sign up for that if you would. We don't spam. We don't sell your information. Nothing like that. We send one email a week, and that contains our schedule for the entire week here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. Of course, we start out on Wednesdays with Dark Wolf's Den Show, and Thursdays we carried it on. Then Friday through Sunday, AJ the Ripon Rabbit does the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show. And if you want to make sure that you know what we're talking about each weekend, make sure you go over there and sign up for that email. You will receive an email every Wednesday, one email, and that's it. Also, while you're over there, why don't you go ahead and check out the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That's right, that's my favorite place to hang out. And it's really easy to get to, really simple, and really free. That's right. Just go to the riponrabbithole.com, select the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. Scroll about halfway down the page to enter the VIP entrance. You will have to okay your microphone and camera, but you can turn that off the moment you get inside. Also, while you're hanging around on the page over there, make sure you check out our groups, our rabbit holes, if you will. There's all kind of things to explore over there, whether you're into lucid dreaming, ley lines perhaps, or even just the Dark Wolf's Den Show. You know, we got our own group over there too, our own rabbit hole. Ladies and gentlemen, that's where we like to hang out, and that's where we're going right after the show is to the 24/7 Backstage Lounge on riponrabbithole.com. That's it for us tonight, guys. On behalf of Walt House, Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musco, AJ the Ripon Rabbit, and everybody over at Ripon Common Sense Radio, we thank you for being here, and remember always, stay awake, but dare to dream. I'll see you guys tomorrow night. How? Yeah! Good night, everybody.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever home. Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in